Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mathur has arrived. We will start in 5 minutes time. You are requested to please take your seats. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome you all to the discussion forum on power since Paris. I would request Mr. Ambarish Dasgupta, President, the Bengal Chamber, Mr. Debe Mukherjee, Chairperson, Energy and Environment Committee, the Bengal Chamber, and Mr. Shutanu Ghosh, President Designate, the Bengal Chamber, to escort Dr. Ajay Mathur, Director General, TERI, to the stage, please. You are requested to take your seats. We will start the program. I'll request our President, Mr. Ambarish Dasgupta, to please deliver the formal welcome address.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I take great pleasure in welcoming you all to today's discussion forum on power since Paris. Over the last several years, of course, our chamber has been providing a lot of inputs, strategic inputs, advisory inputs on various matters related to the industry. And energy power has been one of the fundamental premises on which all the chamber activities has actually been going around. We have made a continuous endeavor to bring to our members and to the corporates of the Eastern region anything that related to the improvements in the power production, power distribution, power transmission, clean energy, clean environment, any happenings in the world, any happenings in the India, and we have made a continuous endeavor to bring that to this part of the country. And this is the maxim of the Energy and the Environment Committee of the Chamber, also the most happening and the active committee of Bengal Chamber today. The theme of the activities of a particular year for us has always centered on the relevant global topic for that year. In this context, this year, we are organizing this discussion forum with a special address by Dr. Ajay Mathur on COP21. Dr. Mathur was a key negotiator and spokesperson for the Indian delegation in the COP21. It is our pleasure and privilege to have him with us for this program. I am told, and I hope that is right, that this is your first visit to Calcutta after becoming the DG of TERI. And our congratulations also for your new responsibility, and thanks for coming here. Globally, there are many well-known names who have raised concerns about the climate change in today's world. The Pope himself, Barack Obama, film artist Leonardo DiCaprio, Prince Charles, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Rockefeller Foundation, and multiple important people, important organizations have raised their concerns, voices, suggestions about this matter. A global chorus of voices applauded the historic climate change agreement reached in December 2015 in Paris, including Ban Ki-moon, Francois Hollande, and representatives from the nearly 200 countries which attended that. India held the key to any global consensus in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. In the parleys held in the run-up to the UN summit in Paris, almost every big country had set itself targets to reduce emissions. So did India. The world's third largest emitter of the greenhouse gases had only pledged to limit the amount of carbon dioxide per unit of GDP. Even China, the other big emitter, also promised similarly. The members and stakeholders of the chamber are very keen, therefore, to understand that what happened in that Paris agreement, what did that entail, and what is in it for us. And therefore, I really hope that today's discussion will be a good eye-opening discussion for us, which can really educate us on the impact on the business and how businesses in India should respond to that agreement. India has finally submitted its intended nationally determined contributions. We would also like to learn from Dr. Mathur his views on India's carbon intensity target vis-a-vis the energy realities in India. Dr. Mathur's address will be followed by a panel discussion on the power realities in India, and we are privileged to have distinguished panel members also with us. Power or electricity, as we all know, I mean, this doesn't require any mention. It is the basic constituent for any infrastructural or industrial growth here for all over the world. And Eastern region, of course, is the one which is definitely a key player in the power sector. And therefore, it actually bears a different significance when we do that in Bengal as far as power goes. For the 12th plan period, 13-17, the Government of India has targeted capacity addition of 88,537 megawatt, against which capacity addition of 61,014 megawatt has already been achieved up till 14-15. During 14-15, a capacity addition of 22,566 megawatt has been achieved, which is 127% of the target of 17,830 megawatt. Private sector contribution accounts for 59% in this total capacity of FY 14-15. India is likely to add 600 GW to 1,200 GW of additional new power generation capacity before 2050. The target for the 12th five-year plan is that of 118.54 GW, out of which 88.54 is to come from conventional sources, while the remainder may come from the renewable energy. The government plan is not only on the target, but it seems to exceed the target capacity right now, targeted capacity. Breakup of the power sector is also 188.9, as I mentioned, from the thermal power, which is 70.6% of the total installed capacity, while hydro 41.27 is 15.4%, renewable is 31.69, which will be around 11.8%. So with this, we feel that there is a good hope for the power sector. There is a good hope for the renewable energy part also. In context to that and what we have signed up in the Paris summit also, may I now welcome Dr. Mathur to come and deliver the keynote speech. And ladies and gentlemen, really wish that we will all be having a very good session today. Thank you.
Before that, we will have Mr. Devi Mukherjee to set the agenda for the day, and I'll take a minute, sir, to set up Dr. Mathur's presentation. There's a folder on presentation.
No. Actually, it's before this, the nature of the title.
Okay. I'm pasting it in the desktop.
Great.
Did it happen? Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks. So
We
it's set
can-
up.
yes.
No problem. Sorry? No. After that. Yeah. Thank you. A very good morning and a very warm welcome to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. COP21, or the 2015 Paris Climate Conference, as it's popularly known to all of us, has been a very important milestone in the journey of nations to combat climate change. What is significant about COP21, or the Paris Agreement, has been that it has been a very pragmatic deal, and that it holds countries, nations accountable, and tries to build ambition over time. Some of the core elements of the Paris Accord has been commitments of nations on emissions, adaptation, finance, transparency, importantly, and steps to promote carbon trading. The Paris Accord surely has tried to strengthen global response to climate change. The outcome of Paris builds on UNFCCC's principle of common but differentiated responsibilities of the countries. But the most important negotiating mandate that came out of Paris is for a post-2020 climate agreement for a legal force which will be applicable to all countries, to all nations. The important negotiating mandate is legal force for all countries, and the other important thing is a stock taking every 5 years, the first one being not later, if I am not mistaken, Dr. Mathur, 2020 possibly, with an initial stock taking in terms of the submission of every country's nationally determined contributions, identification of measures to achieve these contributions, and a report on the emissions at every 5-year interval. We know about India's INDCs in terms of reducing emissions intensity by 33 to 35%, if I'm not mistaken, of its GDP by 2030 against 2005 level, to achieve a 40% cumulative installed power capacity from non-fossil fuel renewable sources of energy by 2030, with access to new technology, low carbon technology, and low international finance, low cost international finance. Also to create an additional carbon sink of 2.5 to 3 billion tons of CO2 equivalent through additional forest and tree covers in the country by 2030. All very ambitious targets. But all in all, the significant message that comes out of Paris is that low carbon global economy has officially arrived. And that's a commitment that has come out of Paris. But the question that's of interest to all of us in the chamber is, what is the full story and how does it impact the business community in the chamber, in the country, and specifically to the members of Bengal Chamber? To tell us the full story, we are indeed delighted, happy as always to have Dr. Ajay Mathur with us, who has been a member of the Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change. He continues to be a member despite having left the government. And we are indeed delighted, sir, that you have joined us this morning to address us and tell us the full story of what went on at Paris and how it impacts business in general in India and worldwide. The program today will be in two parts. The first would be a macro view for someone who has been the negotiator and spokesperson for India at the COP21 meet by Dr. Mathur. After that, followed by an interaction with the audience. He will be very happy, I'm sure, to take a few questions, interact. And the second part of the program would be what I might call a reality check in terms of actually understanding what the ground realities are, what the compulsions are, where we stand in terms of the commitments that we have made in Paris. And we have a galaxy of very distinguished speakers who would constitute the panel for the discussion, to be moderated by Mr. Sanjay Seth from the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, the Secretary of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, who has also been a very close friend of the Chamber and had closely worked with Dr. Mathur in his earlier life when he was leading the Bureau of Energy Efficiency in terms of the energy efficiency and energy conservation policy for the Government of India. It is always customary to introduce the speaker. Of course, Dr. Mathur needs no introduction, but as it is customary, may I take the privilege of formally introducing Dr. Mathur. Dr. Ajay Mathur has taken over as the Director General of TERI, the Energy Research Institute, just about 6-7 weeks ago, possibly, about 7 or maybe 8 weeks ago, and continues to be a member of the Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change. He was the Director General of the Bureau of Energy Efficiency in Government of India for a fairly long time, from 2006 until 2016, and was responsible for bringing energy efficiency into our homes, into offices, factories, the built environment, through significant initiatives as the Star Labeling Program, Energy Conservation Building Code, and very importantly, Perform, Achieve, Trade, regulatory mechanism for the energy-intensive industries in India. Dr. Mathur, interestingly, had earlier worked with TERI from 1986 to 2000, and then headed the climate change team of the World Bank in Washington, D.C. He was the president of Suzlon Energy, and also, I think in 2000, possibly 11 or 12, was heading the interim secretariat at the Green Climate Fund in Bonn. Dr. Mathur has been a key Indian climate change negotiator and also the Indian spokesperson at the 2015, which we have mentioned. And he is a global leader on technological approaches to address climate change. And recently, we are very happy to note that he joined the global group of industrial, financial, and think tank leaders to co-chair an Energy Transitions Commission, which will suggest ways for companies and countries to move towards climate-friendly energy futures. Indeed, a delight to welcome Dr. Mathur amongst us this morning. A very warm welcome to him. May I request Dr. Mathur now to deliver his address. Sir.
Mr. Dasgupta, Mr. Mukherjee, Mr. Ghosh, friends. It's always a pleasure to come back to the Bengal Chamber. I have had some of the most stimulating discussions which have had an influence on my thinking over the many years that you have invited me to be part of you, earlier when I was with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and now with TERI. I am deeply conscious of this honor that you provide me. What I will do today, as Mr. Dasgupta and Mr. Mukherjee mentioned, is to share my views with you on what happened at Paris and what are the implications for the country. What I'd like to do is to, in a sense, speak in three parts. The first is that, when we went to Paris, it was not a blank slate. There was a huge amount of experience that we had. And so what I'd like to do is to share with you that experience. What is it that informed us when we went to Paris? The second is, so what did Paris achieve? What was different? What is it that we have put into place that moves us towards a lower carbon future? Mr. Mukherjee mentioned some of the things. I would like to elaborate on them. And then third part is, so what does it mean for India? What is it that we need to do in order to do our part in moving the world towards a low carbon future? Now, as far as the first part is concerned, what have we learned? Now, there are two strands that come together here. The first is the strand of global climate negotiations. The world realized that changing climate, because of man's interventions, particularly the emission of carbon dioxide from fossil fuel combustion, was changing the climate. This led to the Climate Change Convention, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was signed in 1992, and has since been the subject of a large number. Every year there is a climate change convention which looks at how do we move ahead in moving the world towards a low carbon future. Also, and this is something we should not lose sight of, the world agrees that because of the carbon dioxide that's already there, up there in the atmosphere, there's a certain amount of inevitable climate change which we are already committed to. So there are two challenges. One is to ensure that the total amount of carbon dioxide in the world does not increase so much that we are faced with irreversible climate change. And the second, that the amount of climate change that is already inevitable, that's already committed, we deal with it. We adapt to the adverse impacts of the committed climate change. So both of these are the part of the global agenda. The second strand is about India's energy policy. What are our goals? What have we done? And obviously, since 1992, they have been intertwined, at first rather loosely, and now rather tightly. So how has that intertwining occurred? On the global climate change negotiation side, the 1992 convention ended up in 1997 in what was known as the Kyoto Protocol, where the developed countries were given specific reductions specific to each country on the amount of carbon dioxide that they emit. So as far as the total is concerned, countries were told that to reduce it by 0%, for example, in the case of this, Russia and the former Soviet Union, to 4%, 5%, 7%, 8%. And this had to be achieved by the year 2012. There were a lot of other things. This chamber has talked a great deal about the Clean Development Mechanism, the CDM mechanism, through which the developing countries, which did not have targets, could participate by providing emission reductions which could be counted in what the developed countries had done, the carbon credits, so-called. We all thought it was a big step forward. The problem started occurring as we approached 2012. And the problem was that as countries found that they were not able to meet their targets, they decided to opt out of the protocol. Canada, Australia, Japan, and it became a hollow structure. We did say that there would be a second phase of the Kyoto Protocol. In fact, it exists. Legally, it is in place. But with so many major emitters having stepped out, it told us one thing. There's no point in having a global agreement if countries are not committed themselves to achieving it. So that became one of the learnings with which we went into the negotiations. The second was, for many countries, one of the reasons why, and this particularly was in the case of the United States, even as the Kyoto Protocol was being negotiated, that this is something in which all countries have to participate. And an agreement of this sort, in which large developing country emitters such as India and China don't participate, does not make sense as a global agreement. So the US did not join it right from the beginning. It was also therefore clear, after a huge amount of wrangling with other countries and within the government, that India would need to be part of the solution, that we would need also to be able to say that we are going to reduce we are going to mitigate carbon emissions. We're going to commit to mitigating carbon emissions. That was another issue which we understood when we were going in. Now let me come to the Indian energy picture. Now, as we look at the Indian energy picture and we see it over the past 30 years or so, what is it marked by? One of the large changes that has happened, and particularly in the last few years, is that for the first time, there is a greater generating capacity in this country as far as electricity is concerned, greater than what the economic need is. So at any given time, the amount of generating capacity we have can provide electricity that we want. What is the problem? The problem is that distribution companies would rather drop loads than buy the electricity that is available in the power exchange. Power exchange have electricity available all the time and at relatively low costs. But even at those low costs, the distribution companies would lose money if they buy and they provide it to consumers, which therefore tells us that there is a problem now. We have crossed the first problem, which was that of the amount of electricity that we have. The problem now is how do we ensure that every person has access to adequate and affordable energy. So our thinking shifted from addition of generation to the access provisions. The second thing that has happened over these years is that we suddenly found, of course, we've been importing oil all of these years. Our current import dependence for petroleum products is something like 70%, which will probably go up to 80% in another 5 years or so. We found that apart from importing oil and gas, we also found ourselves importing coal. Now, when I was